Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time from Missouri, for now. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. There is a telephone listen line, and it is working. It works when we are live, 712-770-9418, provided by Global Star. Thank you, Global Star. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith. Uh-oh. Guineith, you... Okay, we lost Guineith. Yeah. Okay, so Friday, got an interesting broadcast. Ron Allen's going to be with us. Ron Allen is a USA Prepares instructor. He's the voice behind our intros, outros, rejoiners. And we're going to talk about what has happened to radio commercials. What has happened? What's happened to radio? I believe that radio is being dumbed down below the lowest common denominator. And that's our number 2. Our number 1 is Rex Curley. You've heard of RK gun shows? Well, RK, Rex Curley. And I met him I met Rex this past weekend, and I asked him, what the heck is happening with gun shows? Where are all the guests? Where are they? You know, those people who pay what used to be $4 and then $5, $6, $7, $8, $10, now $12 to attend, to walk around to see if they want to buy things. What happened to them, and what has happened to the exhibitors, the people trying to sell things from their tables? Where did they go? They used to measure gun shows in the number of tables. Well, the table count's down, and the guest count is down. So we're going to talk about what happened when he's on the air on Friday. So if you have any questions about gun shows, or if you have any questions about radio, Friday's the day to call. 866-582-9933 is the number when we're live. Guineith Isaacs is now with us. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I am well. There's something that has captivated my attention, at least partially, and that is this Harry and Meghan thing. And some people say it's an absolute distraction. I mean, it's just two people. No, I think it's way, 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 way bigger than that. I think it is indicative of what happens with young people, how they want whatever they want, and they don't even know what they want. They say that opposites attract. I got to tell you, I don't think so. Maybe in a few cases. And I think people want to marry people like them. So, for example, if you're Chinese, if you find someone who's Chinese as a spouse, the culture is probably going to be somewhat similar, and that might work really well. And if you're Irish or Italian or English or black or American, Indian, whatever, Japanese, whatever it may be, Australian. I think if you find someone with a similar culture, it's going to work a lot better than if you find someone who was raised with a different culture. So we have Harry, who's been exposed to just fantastic wealth all his life. And you've got Meghan, who wants wealth. So you've got someone who is, in my opinion, a social climber, her, and a guy who's already there, him. Now, how well would that possibly work? And it doesn't look like it's working so well. So she must work some kind of magic on him. And I don't really want to say what I'm thinking, but she must work some kind of magic that has lured him away from the castles and the palaces and the wealth and just thrown it all away. It's like Europe's biggest dope. And I have no respect for her. None. She just can't get enough of me first. Look at me. Look at me walk my dogs. Look at me with this expensive outfit. Look at me with my $157,000 wedding dress in white. I don't think very much of her. Actually, I don't think much of her at all. Actually, I don't even like her. Actually, I dislike her. Actually, I despise her for the way she behaves. Do you have any comments on that?
Wow. These two, I consider that they are the reincarnation of Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves. And they did this the last time around. If you look in the history books and you really read the history books carefully, Henry VIII was his own man until he met Anne of Cleves. And he married Anne of Cleves. Anne of Cleves was, I think, wife number 3. And, so she was after Catherine of Aragon or after Anne Boleyn. And, and then he met Anne of Cleves, and for whatever reason, he married her. And then he couldn't consummate the marriage with Anne of Cleves. And so, they got an annulment, which is kind of like a divorce, not quite the same, but, more or less the same as a divorce after 6 months. And then instead of, booting her out of the palace, he kept her on as a royal counsellor for the rest of her life. And he didn't do anything without asking Anne of Cleves what he should do. So Henry VIII went from being a man's man who did as he pleased, and he was the king, and that was that, and, if you didn't like it, that was too bad, he couldn't make any decisions on his own without asking Anne of Cleves first. And I would say that it's exactly the same pattern of behaviour that's going on here. And within a few years of that, he kept eating and slowed down in his exercise regime. And before long, Henry VIII was so fat that if he wanted to go horse riding, he had to get a crane to pick him up and put him on the back of a 17 or 18 hand-high Clydesdale horse. And that was self-indulgent. And he eventually ended up getting so fat, this was Henry VIII, that he couldn't wipe his own bottom. He had to hire a royal servant who was the royal bottom wiper. And that's quite a change from how he was when he was younger. And it's the same mode of behaviour, but in a modern context. And even after Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves were no longer married, he didn't boot her out of the palace. He still sought her advice and made her a senior royal advisor for every little decision that he made. And so I would say that they are, reincarnated, these two, and it's the same pattern playing out this time as what it was the last time, except this time, thankfully, he's not the king. Last time he was the king, and it ended up going quite badly for all of England because, among other things, Henry VIII failed to produce a male heir, and after he died, his daughters, he did produce a male heir. That was Edward VII, and he was a sickly child, and his sister killed him, basically. Stepsister killed him, half-sister killed him. And that was, it ended up going quite disastrously, but it took a whole generation for the fruits of his actions to play out. Yeah, and, it's, oh my gosh. There really is nothing new under the sun. And the thing is, when God puts us on the earth again, he gives us a chance to try and make some better decisions the next time. And personally, I don't think that they're making the better decisions. I think that they're making the same bad decisions that they made the last time. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Absolutely. And so yesterday, I talked about them because I think it's a really big story. I think they are whiners. I think they are children in 30-year-old bodies. Children in adults' bodies. They are behaving as children. But even though they are doing it, they're not the only ones. There are so many millennials that melt down, can't handle the pressure, but they still have their cell phones. They still send selfies to people. Look at me. Look at my dog. Look at me. Look at my dog. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I mean, nonsense. People are now looking at their cell phones thousands of times per day. Thousands of times per day. So here's what I had to, this is just a recap. This is what the internet says about what I said on yesterday's broadcast. It says, and listen carefully, class, please. New TV shows? Question mark. North America's stupidest people? Europe's biggest dopes? World's biggest losers? And me first's worldwide competition. Harry and Meghan in first place, even before the shows start. Okay? What I'm saying is it's tongue-in-cheek. Who are the stupidest people in America? They are. Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
Because they walked away from the Queen. Harry walked away from his family. He dumped his family. He dumped his royal duties. He dumped the wealth. He had everything. Nobody has more than Harry. Nobody. And he threw it away. Biggest dopes. Same thing. Europe's biggest dopes. Because they had everything. If they wanted to ride horses, shoot, whatever they wanted to do, jet set around, buy $1 million worth of clothing a year. They wanted to take a housing and combine it into a $3 million worth of renovations. Forget the property cost. Forget the house cost. Forget the amenities. Just cleaning it up and renovating it. $3 million. They threw that away. We'll be right back. Guineith is with us live in Australia, and I maintain that Harry and Meghan are demonstrating for the world to see their childish, immature, demanding, look-at-me behavior. Two millennials, the poster children for this kind of behavior. But they're not alone. They are just the centerpiece for the world to see, the billboard for the world to see of how millennials behave. There are tens to hundreds of millions more of these childish millennials. I've seen it. I've seen it lots and lots and lots of times. Know-nothing millennials. Children in adult bodies that don't know how to do much, that think they know everything. And they really know so little. They are consumers of social media. That they know how to do. But what does that do for them? It's kind of like people who watch football games. And when they're all done, what have they accomplished? Well, they know the score, they know the players. They're on the sidelines. They become Monday morning quarterbacks. If only, if I were there, I would have, they could have, we should have. But of course, they weren't there unless they were watching it live, but they weren't on the field. Harry torpedoed the Queen and the rest of his family. They were planning their brand. They were planning this. They registered the Sussex Royal. They registered that for hundreds of, or about 100 products that they plan on labeling with their brand so that they can make money the easy way, licensing their brand. Can you imagine that? But yet, they walked away from the crown. They want the label. They want the title. They want the money. Well, they want their financial independence. But they want it. They don't want it. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they're doing. And they're careless and reckless. And I have a feeling that the damage that Meghan has done to the crown is immeasurable. The respect that was once given to the crown, I believe, has fallen dramatically. And she did it. She did it. She caused it. And is she of the same socioeconomic values of Harry? Now, I don't like Harry either. But they're different. They're not the same. And I'll say it because no one else wants to say it. She is of mixed race. White and black. How is it possible? How is it possible that they could have the same values? Because they had different upbringing. Different upbringing. Generally speaking, this will probably get me in a lot of trouble. I'm not being racist. I'm just saying she is of black and white race. Even her family doesn't get along. She's estranged from her family. Mixed race. It doesn't work so well. Robert De Niro married a black woman. Didn't work so well. I'm surprised that I'm the only one who seems to see this. I would prefer that our children marry people like them, whatever that is. Now, it seems to me that the social part is really, really big. The values, the upbringing, what is important, what's not, what's right, what's wrong. Religion. When Mrs. Finelli and I decided to get married, she was a Dutch Reformed believer. She decided that she would convert to Roman Catholicism. I didn't say, now look, you know how this works, right? You're going to have to be Catholic. She decided on her own without me even mentioning it. Because she thought it was important to have the same belief, and she wanted to know more about Catholicism. Both of us have kind of wandered away from the Catholic Church. We still believe in God, but we don't go to church because we don't think we have to. Did one convince the other? No, we figured it out at the same time. So I've been talking about socioeconomic values. Now, I know for a fact that Mrs. Finelli is not going to go and buy a new car and say, honey, wait till you see what I bought in the driveway for you. It's never going to happen. However, that's because we have the same socioeconomic values. Meghan and Harry do not, in my opinion, because she spent almost $1 million on her wardrobe in 1 year, 2018. Now, what would you do if your wife pulled a stunt like that? Or your husband pulled a stunt like that? Would you blow a gasket? Would you say, well, no, it's okay, it's only money? What would you do? That's what I'm talking about. So All of a sudden, she's got so much money she doesn't know what to do with it, and she blows it in public for everybody to see. And the taxpayers are saying, whoa, what? What? That's what I'm talking about. And if you want to see something really interesting, here's what you do. You go to the internet, your favorite search engine. It probably should be something like Start Page or DuckDuckGo. Go to DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo.com, and type in Meghan. Here's what I typed in: Meghan Markle, family. Then click on images. Take a look at what you see. And look at the pictures that are there. And then in your own mind, say, how well is this going to work with the royal family? How is the family barbecue with all the in-laws going to work out? Do you think everybody wants the same kind of food? Do you think everybody's going to want the same kind of music? Do you think everybody's going to be talking about the same kind of subjects? Or will there be like a line down the middle of the barbecue where one half of the family, one side, is on one side of the line and the other side of the family is on the other side? It's difficult to make mixed marriages work. It really is. No one's saying it, so I figured I'd say it. And this may be my last day. I may be accused of being a racist. I'm not a racist. I have some wonderful black friends. Wonderful. I've been to the farm. I've been to their weddings. I went to school with them. We really love each other. But I think socioeconomic values are very, very important. And I think you all ought to consider that. And I think that's what's going to kill this marriage and maybe take down the royal family. Do you think that that's a stretch, Guineith, what I just said about this could be damaging and maybe take down the royal family?
Well, I think that, I think that Prince William was probably doing the right thing and trying to talk some sense into his little brother, and that his little brother just couldn't see it, and that was what created the rift between them. I think that because Prince William has sort of made that stand and tried to say to him, listen, just, cut it out. And, could you try and get your wife to, do what she's supposed to do? I think that he objected to that, and that was what created the rift. And I think because Prince William did that, I think that this is not going to pull down the whole royal family. So I think that they're making some really unwise decisions, and that the Sussexes are digging themselves into a bit of a hole. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And so here's the question that I don't understand. Can Parliament meet and say, you know what, we don't need them anymore? We really run the country. We really don't need the Queen. We don't need the royals. We don't need the expenses. We don't need any of these extravagances. So let's abolish the royal portion of the government. Can Parliament do that?
Well, yes and no. They did it once before, and that really didn't work so well. It threw the country into a civil war. And that was from about the year 1647, 1648 to 1660. They actually beheaded King Charles I, and they tried to murder his son as well, but his son fled from the Battle of Worcester, and he didn't flee from the Battle of Worcester. He was kidnapped out of the Battle of Worcester by a friend of his who happened to be a highwayman. His name was called James Hind. James Hind rode into the battle, saw that the king was in desperate, or the prince, he was going to be the king one day, but saw that the prince was in desperate trouble, rode into the battle, scooped him up, put him on his horse, and rode off with him. And, they ended up at a particular bay where there was a French ship sitting in the bay, and then, Prince Charles, not the one we've got today, but the one who would become Charles II, got into a boat and was rowed across to the French ship, sailed off to France, and that was what happened then. And then when that happened, then Parliament took over and imposed such tyranny that England had not seen in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, including massive taxation, which we've discussed on this broadcast before. They were taxing windows and chimneys. So, and a lot of families were driven to poverty. A lot of immensely wealthy families were driven to tremendous poverty by this. And that is why the British are so reluctant to get rid of the royals, because the royals, for all their flaws, do provide some sort of checks and balances that is fairly independent of politics. But the thing is that there's this thing called noblesse oblige, where the nobles, especially the royal family, are required to look after the ordinary people. That's you and me, or not you because you're American, but everybody who's under the British Empire, or was the British Empire, or whatever. But the royal family is supposed to ensure that our rights are maintained. Okay? And if they stop doing that, then the people are entitled to engage in lawful rebellion. And that is under Section 61 of the Magna Carta. And that is the same Section 61 of the Magna Carta that the Americans stood on hundreds of years ago with their lawful rebellion, that which was, began at the Battle of Lexington Concord, that began the War of Independence because the British Crown wanted to take people's guns. And, the thing that people overlook is that the British Crown is supposed to be there to ensure that our common law rights are upheld. This is common law rights like, the right to bear arms. That right to bear arms didn't come with the Second Amendment. The right to bear arms was given by God. And it was given by God to be a check and a balance on tyrannical power, either from government or from an invading military force. If everybody, and we saw this earlier on this week in Richmond, because the people who were there were bearing arms, then the government, so-called, what's-his-face who calls himself the governor of Virginia, was not able to start the riot that he wanted to start because there were just too many armed people there who would take out any morons who wanted to come in and make trouble. But it's supposed to be the Crown's duty to ensure that the people are armed. It's the Crown's duty to ensure that the people have rights like habeas corpus. That means the privacy of the person, okay? That means, unwarranted searches, that the blue team are not allowed to just stop you for no reason, just because they feel like it, and infringe on your rights and steal your property. And just search your vehicle, see what you've got. If you've got $10,000 in there, hey, maybe you're taking that $10,000 you know, to give as a wedding present to your daughter or something. I don't know. You know, in some cultures, that's how they are. They take, you know, in some, you know, even in some European cultures, they give large amounts of cash to their, you know, children at their wedding just to, you know, help them get started. The Greeks do that, you know. So if you're a Greek man and you're on your way to a Greek wedding, you might have $10,000 in the car just to give to your children that are getting married, just to give them a bit of a happy start in life, you know. But if you do that today, then the cops are going to pull you over and they're going to say, oh, where'd you get this $10,000 from? It obviously comes from dealing in drugs and we're going to take it, thank you very much. And they've become nothing more than a hireman's cartel, and they're supported in these actions by the Crown. And this is what is really the really, really big danger. The whole Harry and Meghan thing is a symptom, not a disease. That is a symptom of a royal house that has really gotten out of control, has actually lost any real power, and is now, you know, having a last desperate fling of wealth and partying, because they know that coming down the road is really, really difficult times. And I don't think that Meghan knows this. And I don't know if Harry even consciously knows this, but this is what royal families always do. I don't wish any harm on the royal family. You know, I want them to stay, because as long as they stay, then some semblance of common law is upheld in the realm. You know, if you look at what happened to the Romanov in Russia, and if you look what happened to the Bourbon King in France, okay, it's all the same. They get into wealth and luxury.
Hold that thought. Class, it's not just Harry and Meghan. We are seeing the symptoms of the decay of morality, reckless spending of other people's money, the lack of knowledge of etiquette, bad behavior, and the flaunting of the lack of knowledge of proper behavior. This bad behavior is happening in the United States as well. Young people are recklessly spending the hard-earned wealth / inheritance of people who have died before them. They're buying fancy cars, jewelry, fancy clothing, vacations, stuff to make them happy. But the people who left that money did not necessarily do that. They worked hard to earn that money, not to be squandered. They would be spinning in their graves if they knew that young people today were waiting for them to die so they could get the money to make them happy, to buy things to make them happy. And if you look at what Meghan has been doing, she's been spending money to make herself happy. Here is an article, Daily Mail, United Kingdom. Quote, exclusive. It's the best thing that could ever happen to him. Meghan tells friends it was her love for Harry that made their new life possible, and he'll flourish now, as she insists their spirits were being crushed by royal family. Meghan Markle has been telling her friends that quitting the royal family is the best thing that could ever happen to Prince Harry, a source told Daily Mail. She said that, like her, his spirit was being crushed and simply couldn't, and she simply couldn't stand to see him suffer any more. They're living in a $14 million mansion, and there's no rush to move out of it. They've been using it. They've been using a $14 million mansion for their family. The friend also said that Meghan and Harry are not planning on changing their website or Instagram name. They will keep the royal part in the website and the name. Meghan says they will always be considered royalty regardless of where they live or what they do. Does that sound like a me-firster to you? It sure does to me. That's why I'm disgusted with that pair. It just bothers me. They think they deserve it. What does Harry know how to do? Do you think he could change your oil or replace a shock absorber? Patch a tire? Change a water pump? Think he could do any of those things? I doubt it.
Probably not.
I doubt it. Yeah.
Probably not.
So,
the Queen could, if she was younger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She could get in a...
She used to do mechanical repairs on her own vehicles when she was younger. She learned how to do it herself. She didn't have to, but she was curious as to how this happened, how an automobile worked, and she got the mechanic to teach her how to do basic mechanical repairs. So that if she was out and about one day and her car broke down, that she might be able to, fix it herself and get it home. But, she's 93 now, and I don't think anyone would expect their 93-year-old grandma to go changing the oil.
Yeah, and if we put a tank, a military tank in front of her, and she got in it, she might say something like, wait a minute, just give me a minute. It's been a long time since I drove one of these.
Yeah, she probably would, actually.
And I'm not exaggerating.
And she'd say something like, oh, yes, it's not so bad. I can do this. I have this.
Yeah, I remember. Now.
I remember how.
Yeah, I haven't been in one of these in a while.
There we go.
All right, well, I got
that was,
Joe.
Yeah.
Joanne sent me this. Now we've got a little bit of a delay, so it's difficult. We're stepping on each other verbally, not intentionally, but it's because of the delay across half the world. But here is something that Joanne, one of our class, sent me, and this is about the tax implications for Harry and Meghan. Now that Harry and Meghan intend to retreat from the royal duties to attain financial independence, the tax considerations are a little up in the air. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. It's a real problem. Are they going to pay U.S. taxes, or are they going to avoid them? Are they going to pay U.K. taxes, or are they going to avoid them? How about Canadian taxes? Exactly where are they? And Meghan is a U.S. citizen. She's not a U.K. citizen. So she's going to have to make up her mind, and it's going to cost them dearly. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Last hour, I didn't only touch the third rail of political correctness or incorrectness. I jumped on it. Because somebody has to. Your television is teaching you to marry people different from you. Your television is telling you that homosexuality is great. It's telling you that blue, green, or purple hair is stylish. And some people believe that tripe. I don't. The third rail is also known as the live rail. It's the method of providing electric power to a railway or locomotive or train. And if you touch it, that's the one you get that kills you. The third rail. That's what that means. So this could be our last broadcast. I may be called out as a racist. That's not true. I'm just telling you that, in my opinion, people should be very cognizant of who they marry and try to marry someone like you, whatever you are. We're all different. So I think your best chance of staying married, happily married, is to find someone like you. And if you want examples of what does not work, look at Hollywood. Look at how those marriages fail. Can you imagine being on your 4th, 5th, 6th marriage? Can you imagine that? That's what happens in Hollywood. Johnny Carson, I had a whole bunch of marriages. I don't think I can count that high. And he's not the only one. It's common. So you really need to find someone like you. That doesn't mean you can't have friends that are of different races and ethnicities. I think that's great. I do. I have friends of many different religions. Buddhist, Jewish, Christian. And I have some agnostics as friends and Gnostics as friends. Men and women. I don't have any transgender friends. And I don't think I have any homosexual friends. Because their behavior is risky and foreign to me. Guineith, any comments before we talk about the next topic you wanted to discuss?
Okay. I would say this is going to kind of segue into what we're going to talk about next. All of this is right exactly how things go just before we get to Article 61 of the Magna Carta moment, where people begin to engage in lawful rebellion against whatever government pretends to be out there. This is the sort of behaviour that you see just before times like Lexington Concord. It's the sort of behaviour you see just before the French Revolution, just before the Russian Revolution. This sort of thing happened, where you just had, really just, you could only really describe it as lascivious. Now, lascivious is not a word that's often used these days, and a lot of people probably don't know what it means, but it means just without moral constraint. That is the sort of behaviour that you see every time you turn the TV on, if you have a TV, which I don't, or any time that you look out there in the world. Just go down and look at your local shopping centre and you'll see lascivious behaviour among the young people. And a number of years ago, there was a particular royal ceremony, and this royal ceremony required a 16-year-old virgin to participate in the ceremony, to do something like, it was to read a particular text or something like that for this formal ceremony. So it wasn't anything ooky-spooky, but it was required that this particular text and this particular royal ceremony be read by a young virgin. And they went from one end of the country to the other, the royal officials, and they could not even find one 16-year-old virgin in the whole country, female virgin in the whole country. And that was saying something. It was saying that we've really lost our way. And because of that, they could not do this particular ceremony. It's just really sad, you know. And people forget, you look just one generation ago or two generations ago, back in the early 1960s and 1950s, it was actually really, really common for both people to be virgins on their wedding night. And I've got a book here, which is a book on etiquette for young married couples and how you should conduct yourself. And it's a lot of really, really good advice. And it's about dealing with his friends, dealing with her friends, dealing with their friends, how to host a dinner party, and all this sort of stuff. And I don't think that people would know how to do that now. I can't see any books like that being written about that sort of thing. I don't think anyone's got a clue. Does that make sense, Vincent? I think that we're pretty near the bottom, that there's going to be a lawful revolution fairly soon, and there's going to be a major systemic collapse as well. And then you're going to see, I don't want to see this happen, but I can just see it happening. I don't want for it to happen, but I can see it happening. There's going to be a thinning of the herd, Vincent. Does that make sense?
It does, and as you were saying that, I got up. I have a bookcase in the studio, and I picked a book up off the shelf. It's called The New Emily Post's Etiquette, the Blue Book of Social Usage. The cost in 1959 was $5.50. It was my mother's. I inherited it. It's got 671 pages, I believe. And I see that there are bookmarks in it. And it has to do with the subject of invitations, sending an invitation, and how they are accepted or not accepted. There is the setting of the table. I'm looking at the pictures of how to set the table with the knives and forks and so forth. I'm looking at a letter where death was a release. So how do you respond when you hear that someone dies? These are things that are in this book. And I doubt that many young people have even heard of this book, let alone held it, let alone opened it, let alone read it. My mother taught me etiquette. And since we've already touched the third rail, jumped on the third rail, there's no reason for me to refrain from saying what I'm going to say next. I have been a guest on other radio broadcasts, not GCN. And I have noticed that on Genesis Communications Network, people who call us are polite. They exhibit manners. They don't yell and scream. They do not intentionally talk over us. And it's delightful. It's only happened maybe once where I had to come down on someone who called. Once in over 8 years on GCN. However, I've been on other radio broadcasts, not on GCN. And I got to tell you, I lose my temper because the people who call in are used to duking it out, fighting it out with whatever shows they call in on that other network. And it's not so pleasant because they talk over you. They don't yield. They're not as polite. Can you imagine that? And I was discussing this with one of our radio friends off the air. I said, I see a difference. I see a difference. Class, so if you might want to pay attention to that too and see what the difference between callers on one radio program or one network versus another. Not everybody's polite. And frankly, I don't want to engage with people who are not polite. I can't stand them. They exhibit the behavior in their automobiles. They exhibit their behavior when they cut you off. They exhibit their behavior when they don't pay attention to their surroundings and they hold you up because they're on their phone and the light turned green and they're still not paying attention, or they go very slowly because they can't do two things at one time, like talk and drive on the phone. Or they leave their shopping carts wherever they darn well please. Or they leave their shopping cart in the parking lot wherever they darn well please because it's too hard or they're too fat to put it back in the cart return. Or whatever the reason is. Carelessness? I don't know. It's awful. And people show up. I've talked to Marty Barrett. She teaches college biology. People show up to her class in their pajamas. They haven't bathed. They smell. And her response is, oh, still single, I guess, huh? We're falling down. And the Harry and Meghan thing, the reason I keep talking about it day after day is because it's symptomatic. It's in your face. It's unacceptable. And I don't let people on my property who behave like that. I don't want them here. Consuming, wasting my resources, the ones that I've worked hard for. It makes me angry, Guineith, just to even think about this. But it's everywhere. And the school system's not fixing it. And the politicians aren't fixing it.
The school system's part of the problem.
Right.
Big
Even
part
the
of the problem.
parents don't want to bring their children up short and say, what's the matter with you? Parents, teachers, administrators, bosses, they all put up with it. Walmart, pink hair, that's okay. Not to me. We'll be right back. Guineith has a very serious topic. It's coming up. I just want to mention the tax implications very quickly. So, while Meghan is still a U.S. citizen, she is therefore required to pay U.S. taxes on her worldwide income. Harry could technically elect to be treated as a U.S. taxpayer and file jointly with Meghan. Meghan, if Meghan intends to become a UK citizen, she'd have to go through the process, and it would require Meghan to have lived in the country for 3 years before becoming eligible for naturalization. Once gaining UK citizenship, Meghan could elect to relinquish her U.S. citizenship and save her the expense and trouble of filing U.S. tax returns. The problem is she'd have to pay the exit tax. So it's tricky. It's tricky. So they've got worldwide wealth, and I'm sure they want to avoid paying taxes on it. So that is the website that I got that from is called TAXPROF, Tax Professional. You can find it as well. Guineith, what's next?
Okay, I have got a very, very serious topic to go into. Just earlier on this week, something really, really quite tragic happened to a friend of mine. He was found, his name was Vincent Ashley, okay, and he was found dead in rather unusual circumstances, okay. Initially, people were trying to paint his death as a suicide, but there's since come out details from, friends of mine that I've gotten in contact with who know what happened with, when he was found. And it doesn't sound like suicide to me, Vincent, and I'll tell you why. He was found dead. A bit of background about this guy, just before I go into the circumstances of his death, and that will make a bit more sense. This man was a Commonwealth public official, so it kind of does tie in to the whole royal thing, because what being a Commonwealth public official means is that you stand with the authority of the Crown behind you to bring corrupt officials back into line. And so if you decide that a certain corrupt official needs to face some discipline, then you are empowered by the Crown to make sure that discipline happens. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Sure. Absolutely.
So Vincent Ashley was a Commonwealth public official, and he had gone to a great deal of trouble to put together a lawsuit for filing in the High Court of Australia at Melbourne. Okay, so the Melbourne Supreme Court, which is the High Court of Australia in Melbourne. And he had all these documents already to file. He was going to go into the courthouse to file them, and something happened. We don't know what happened, except that later on that day he was found sitting in his car in the car park of the courthouse with a pipe running from his exhaust into his window and his car engine running, and him sitting in the seat of his car dead with all the court documents sitting next to him that he was about to file pretty well then, you know. And that really, to me, does not sound like a suicide. It sounds like somebody really didn't like the fact that he was going to file suit, but when that he was going to file suit, and somehow managed to get a hold of him and, as they would put it, neutralized him.
We'll talk about this more when we come.
That's my interpretation of that set of facts.
Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia, and she is telling us about her friend who has died in what some might be calling a suicide, with a hose or a pipe from the exhaust pipe into the vehicle, with the documents in the car ready to be filed in court. His name was Vincent Ashley. Guineith, please continue.
Okay. What has happened to those documents since then is not quite clear. Okay, I need to point that out. I want to know where those court documents are. And if there's anyone out there who knows where they are, okay, I would at least like to have copies of them, because he had put a lot of work into this court filing. And it's, you know, I've spoken to friends of his who spoke to him in the days immediately before his death, and they described his mood in the days immediately before his death as being upbeat, positive. You know, that he was optimistic. He felt that he'd done the work right, and that his chances of success in this litigation were extremely high. That that he knew what he was doing, and that he was very, very confident of success in this lawsuit. And he was self-representing, but he was somebody who who really knew what he was about. He didn't have any legal education, but he was somebody who had studied the law a great deal. And in his professional life, he wasn't a nobody. He was a bit of a rock star, literally. He had a band. He was the lead bass player and singer in the band was called the Bleeding Rose, okay? And it was a rock band. The music's not going to be to everybody's taste, but he had been playing he had been managing this band, and he had been, organising events, writing music, hiring musicians and such like since 1989. So for 30 years, he had this rock band that was basically his life and soul, and that was his career. That was how he made his money. And he was nominated several times for Grammy Awards, and he had recording contracts and, all sorts. So he wasn't somebody who was, some no-hoper who's got a band who's going to make it one day. Do you know what I mean? So his band had they weren't going to fill football stadiums, but they were making a comfortable living for themselves. Does that make sense, Vincent? He had everything to live for, is what I'm saying.
Yes, it does. Robert in Kansas, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Hey, Vincent. Thanks for taking my call. Hello, Guineith. I wanted to call in. You guys were talking about morality and how society is falling apart, stuff like that. And I wanted to give my opinion on how we fix that, using logic, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, you just want this because it's a religious reason. However, the religious reasons that people have really are just taken from nature and God's design, and then they're put into the religious context. So, for instance, like the whole gay marriage thing, something like that, we've talked about that before. If you put two men together or two women together, right, they don't produce any fruit. There's no life that occurs from that. You put a masculine with a feminine, and you get new life, right, which is kind of tells you something that is the order of reality, right? So I think we can use that concept in so many ways where you're not saying, well, my religious book says this. You can more point to nature and to just logic, right, and trying to understand some of these things. So my solution, Vince, I've talked about this kind of with Rich Sheben, right, about how do we restore society. Well, what it really is based around is removing the undue rights of women. And I called in when Guineith was on just because she's a pretty based woman, so I thought she might be able to understand, or not understand, but just agree with me on some of these things, because I have found women who, once I explain this, they're like, well, it does make sense, right? It actually, women aren't men, and that's known. And so for them to have really the same rights, because if women have a right, it oftentimes means that a man does not have the right. So in my opinion, women were given rights in order to take away the man, the protector, right, over society, such that these people, these controllers, Vince, it seems to be like their religion is to hurt kids. And so what they do is they remove the man and take away his rights so that they can get at the children. And then you do that for long enough, right, and you destroy your society. You destroy, what we're seeing today. And so, and it's kind of it's hard to talk about removing the rights of women, because you love women, and and people will see it as the opposite of that when you start going down that road. But it's not true. If you love women, you do. So what we have to do is discuss these things about what rights should they have and should they not, if we want to restore function to our society. We really do, because it's probably the main reason, and I'll defer to Dr. Shealy on some of the psychological issues, but the broken family, not having the love of the masculine in the family, the father, is the source of, it's the biggest problem, is that a father is no longer has his rights, right, to his children, to his family. And once you take that away, evil can come in, because the nurturer is left, the mother, the nurturer, she's left, but the protector's gone. So then evil can come in and create the situation we're seeing today when we don't even know if, a man is a man or a woman is a woman, a transgender thing. Like people are they're getting so crazy with all this insanity, and they're not being logical. And so, it's a hard conversation to have, but I wanted to have it with you guys if I could.
Sure. Now, bear in mind that Guineith was married. She had a wonderful husband, but he died. So Guineith had to take care of both roles, the father and the mother. She was and is the head of the household. And I have immense respect for her for doing this. And I believe she's done it very well. I think what you're saying is that society, as in the United States, is removing the masculinity component of the two-parent male-female family. And so that when something goes wrong, nobody in that household that has been emasculated thinks about where is Lucille to extract a little bit of justice, since the system doesn't. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that is one thing, Vincent, but just the love of the masculine is different than the love of the feminine. They're both required, but they are different. They're not the same. And,
Let's
we go through...
Let's see what Guineith has to say.
Okay. I just want to say that Lucille and I are well acquainted. But I have a number of different Lucille mechanisms, and I think that if anyone came up the driveway with ill intent, we have early warning systems, and I would, shortly after we moved onto this land, we had people coming up to the boundary of the land in the middle of the night, and I basically went out there, shouted and screamed into the darkness. We could hear them moving around, okay? And the following morning, I found that there were knives dropped on our boundary line. Who these people were, why, obviously they were there with ill intent. But I'll tell you what I did. I went out there and I had an axe with me. And I was wielding the axe above the shoulder, waving it around, shouting and screaming, saying basically words to the effect of, "Come on, you want to fight? You want to take my land? Come on, I dare you, come on." And that sort of thing, except probably my language was a bit potty mouth in there as well. But that's something that might happen from time to time when I get into that sort of mood. And because,
you're not designed to fight. You're not designed for that. You are not designed to fight where men are.
I had no choice.
Well, I'm not saying you did. I'm saying that
if I didn't fight, I wouldn't have anything. I wouldn't have my children. I wouldn't have my farm. I wouldn't have anything.
But just
because
I'm not designed
really,
to
really
give life.
People try and rob me of everything I have who have thought that I have been of a weak feminine sort because I happen to be female and I'm heterosexual, okay? And, my husband was a gangster, and he taught me when we were married how to be that little bit aggressive and assertive in the defense of your own rights, because that's how he was. He was really quite an assertive. He was a man's man. He was a master at Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. He could, throw you across the room with the tip of two fingers. He was somebody who, he was a crack shot with a firearm, and I'd seen him when two women came up the road. One held a motorcycle chain, the other one held a baseball bat, and he fought them both off. He was a street fighter from when he was 6 years old, and he taught me that in this world, you have to defend what you have. And he instructed me, he had a premonition that he was going to die, and he said basically that I should leave where I was, which I didn't, and I suffered because of it. Afterwards I left. But
Hold that thought, Guineith. We're going into a break. Did you hear that, Megan? No whining. Did you hear that, Harry? No whining. Just a point of information. Guineith mentioned that she is close to Lucille. Now, for those of you who are new to this broadcast, Lucille is not a woman in this case. Lucille is the name of a Louisville Slugger baseball bat that has the business end wrapped in barbed wire. That is Lucille. I had a question for Robert, and then I wanted to ask Guineith about the dust storms that have plagued Australia. Robert, I mentioned that I've noticed those who call in to USA Prepares on GCN are polite and well-mannered. And that's not always the case with other broadcasts, meaning being polite and well-mannered is not always exhibited by those who are speaking, calling, and hosting other broadcasts. Is that something that you've seen, or am I imagining that we are different?
Yeah, Vince, every show is different. I did want to mention real quick the rights that negate the rights of men are the ones we should focus on in terms of removing them from women and protect the kids, restore society. And those rights are going to be abortion would be the first one, to protect the unborn children. So, for instance, a man doesn't have the right to prevent a woman from killing his baby. And so he doesn't have that right. So that's an example. The second is divorce. Women in America, they constitute 80% the initiation of divorce. And then the third, the final one, is really voting. And I know that sounds broad, but as you can see, you're going to get gay marriage, trans kids, the end of the First and Second Amendment, which is happening now. And if you look at the statistical voting patterns of women, I'm sure there's almost no woman listening to me that would vote away your Second Amendment rights probably on here. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that if 80% of women or 75 or whatever is voting against gun rights, well, inevitably you're going to see Virginia and worse happen. So that's what we do to restore everything. And Vince, I try to be polite. This is your show. And if I ever say anything, I know you have my home number. You give me a call, and I'll try to correct myself on your show. That's my opinion. If you let me speak and speak in a colorful way, then I would do that too. But this is your house, and I'm gonna just do whatever I think you want.
Well, my question is, do you see other broadcasts where callers are not as polite as they are on USA Prepares? Because I see that.
The host is not as polite as you, so you have to understand just the dynamic of what's going on. If you have a guy who is, not as polite, right, and he uses language and stuff like that, then he's going to attract those people. And then it's also the subject matter, Vincent. If you're talking about certain things, you heard me on here with Rich Sheben about drafting women, right? I got emotional because I've been in the military and I know what women are like in the military, and I just, it's just so evil to put a woman in the front lines of combat and act like this is a normal thing, guys. It is just, it's unbelievable what's going on. And I got emotional, Vince, and I apologize, and I hope that you accept that. And that's all I can do, just because I care, Vince. It wasn't because You know,
There's
that's
nothing,
what it is. Okay.
There's nothing to apologize for. Bill Clinton was in the forefront of putting women in the military, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, Vince, and you know, it's not that a woman can't serve and be in a role, but women are not men, and it's just that simple. And a lot of men are weak and dumb and unable to fulfill those roles. So what you need, not only do you need a man, you need a strong, intelligent man to be a leader. Okay, and am I saying a woman can't lead? Well, Vincent, you know where all the meritocracies, not the matriarchies, do you know where all the matriarchies eventually end up? They end up starving to death or getting invaded and destroyed because they're not men and they don't understand men and how men are. And we are more powerful. We are. It's just period. Guineith was talking about, I think his name is Archie, talking about her husband. And I'm sure Guineith can handle herself, Vincent. But if Archie was there, how much safer would Guineith be? I mean,
well, she would be safer. She would be safer. But I got to tell you, Robert, Guineith is your size.
Good.
Guineith, any comments?
Yeah, I just want to say I really do miss Archie every day. I've had to step up to the plate. I haven't had a choice. I've had to become the man of the house. And if I hadn't become the man of the house, I wouldn't have had a house. I wouldn't have had children. I wouldn't have had anything.
It would have been stolen from you.
Yes.
All of it.
I'm proud of you, Guineith.
And I am too. Robert, Guineith, thank you so much for being with us today.